Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cinematic Schematic, the official podcast of the Cinematropolis.com, your home to thoughtful conversations on film. I'm your host, Caleb Masters, and boy, it is good to be back at the mic with my co-host, because today we are getting things back into our regularly scheduled programming for a review of something devious, something mischievous, and that is the discussion around Wicked for Good. That's right. We are going to be reviewing the box office hit, the part two that's not called part two, Wicked for Good. Now, before we get to our review of Wicked, we're going to be talking about a few of the big movie news items that have occurred in the industry since Laron and I have been away from the microphone since the end of September, at least in our little discussion type format. And then we'll jump into a spoiler-free review of Wicked for Good, and then conclude, as we always do, with the spoiler discussion. I'm so thrilled after having to do a bunch of what we call async recordings in the void somewhere between Oklahoma City and Seattle, Washington. I'm so excited to be rejoined my co-host. He's an award-winning Oklahoma filmmaker. And by the way, he also has had some huge wins in his crowdsourcing campaign for his next film, Laron Chapman. Laron, welcome back, sir.
It's so good to be not digitally across from you, but back in that same space again. It has definitely been an adjustment period. You are sorely missed, but the beauty of technology allows us to still connect in this way. So honored to still be here. Honored to be talking movies with my favorite person to talk movies with. So thanks for having me.
You're warming my heart, Laron. I've missed you, and I feel like we both have significant others, and I won't speak for your situation. My wife loves to talk about movies with me, but even she is like, you should talk to Laron about that sometimes. So I have deeply missed our conversations. There've been so many movies that have come out. We are like in the midst of sort of the end of the year sprint. We're not only getting the big popcorn movies like Wicked for Good, but we're also getting an onslaught of the critically acclaimed festival films. So many things to catch up on. It will not be the same being virtual. However, I'm glad through the power of technology, as you said, we can keep this conversation going. Now, listeners, this is the beginning. Consider this the V.5 of the next iteration of the Cinematic Schematic, the Cinematropolis. We are experimenting with video. You've probably seen us do a few of our little video reviews on Instagram. So if not, check us out on Instagram at the Cinematrop. Where we're going to be trying to get more FaceTime with Laron and myself. So you'll probably start to see a little more of us pop up, whether that be on your social media feeds or on YouTube if you are big into the YouTube. But this is going to continue to evolve in the weeks and months to come. So hang tight. You're in for a ride. We're in for an exciting journey as well. I can't wait to be continuing movie conversations in the new format. Now, Laron, I didn't run this by you before recording, but the last time listeners heard you and I talk to each other, we were still in a studio talking to each other about your new film, To Make the World Quiet. I'm just curious, any updates you care to share on sort of the progress of your crowdsourcing and where that project's at?
Yeah, in 60 days, we raised just under the $50,000 that which was my kind of ultimate goal. Obviously, the ultimate goal is $1 million, but 50,000 being the baseline for what we need to make this movie properly and decent with the resources that we have available to us. And to have done that in 60 days is kind of bananas to me, because it took me 6 months to raise less than that for my first feature film. So that shows you that there has been some growth in the networking that I've done over that period of time, that 7 years from the last film up till now, and the enthusiasm and the interest in people actually wanting me to make another project. So that is very comforting and validating for me. And it also puts the pressure on me to actually produce something that is worthwhile. So very excited for the developments of that coming next year. The plan is to shoot it in fall of next year. So that is the goal. That's what we're aiming towards. And we're in a good position to do that. So
Excellent. Well, congratulations on the huge success of your crowdsourcing campaign. I never doubted you for a moment. For listeners, for years, Laron has been hustling in Oklahoma City film. He's been working on so many different projects. He's programmer at Dead Center. He's on this podcast on a regular basis. He has lived the movie life more than almost any Oklahoman I know personally. So and he hasn't really asked for a lot for his projects in return. So I say it's to say, Laron, I never had a doubt that you'd be successful. Um, how fast and how successful you were in a very short amount of time, truly impressive and an absolutely reflection of all you've given to the Oklahoma City and Oklahoma film community at large. So congrats on that. I'm very excited to see updates on that in the future.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's very like I said, it's very heartwarming, to see that I still have the support of our local community and that we're still able to make movies even in the worst of economies.
Yeah,
so
right.
so that people still want to see art being made by people that want to make it, and have something to say. So that's awesome.
Absolutely. And again, having gotten a little bit of a taster at your launch party event for the fundraiser, I can say, ladies and gentlemen, he's got some really exciting, really compelling, some outside of the box for you things to say and ways to say it. So with the
Yeah.
genre piece, so looking forward to that. Well, listeners, if you enjoyed any of our previous conversations back when we were in the studio, or you're enjoying this conversation we're having today and you want to hear more, I do remind you that you can head on over to your preferred podcast app, like, subscribe, follow. If you're on YouTube, ring the bell. We'd really appreciate it if you join that conversation with us. And by the way, a lot of different ways you can comment. If you're on Spotify, you can comment on Spotify, YouTube. There's a comment section, or via any of the social medias. Give us that feedback and your thoughts on Wicked, Laron's crowdsourcing, any of the movie news we're about to talk about. We want to hear all of it. Well, Laron, with all that said, I think there's a lot of things that have happened in the film industry while I've been on my journey and you've been crowdsourcing for your film to make the world quiet. Let's see. I got 3 news items today, and I just want to get your take on it and thought we could talk about it because it's not, we are not the business people writing the checks or even the business analysts, but I personally am very invested in sort of the larger moves that are happening within the studio system and the economics of it. Because if you follow those trends and what's happening, you can sort of start to understand why certain choices are made about what movies get made and who's calling the shots. So anyway, I thought I have 3 stories. One of them might have to do with the Fast family. We're going to save the best for last, though.
Yeah.
There are 3 stories that I thought might be pertinent to you and I's interest as well as listeners' interest. And the first is Warner Brothers. This is according to Fortune, published October 21st. Warner Brothers confirms it's considering a sale after unsolicited interest from multiple parties. And that day, the stock soared over 11%. So just a quick snippet from that story. Again, comes from Fortune. Warner Brothers Discovery has announced it has initiated a comprehensive review of strategic alternatives. So originally, it was planning to split into 2 companies. One that was just going to be all of the movies and TV, HBO. Zaslav was going to run that, and they were going to separate all of their legacy media, CNN and all the different cable channels they owned into separate businesses. Well, so that's what we say alternatives. That is Wall Street speak for considering a sale process, as rumors have swirled for months that one of Hollywood's legacy studios could be acquired. The company disclosed in a press release that it had received several unsolicited interests from multiple parties for the entire company and for its iconic Warner Brothers segment. Paramount Global itself, recently acquired by David Ellison, the son of Trump ally Larry Ellison, reportedly made a $20 per share bid earlier this month. Again, that's according to Fortune. And there is reference to multiple parties there. So, in a separate story by the Hollywood Reporter titled Warner Brothers is for sale, who's buying? They list several possible buyers. Paramount is considered the front runner in this scenario, but other bidders include Comcast, that is Universal's parent company, Netflix specifically more interested in the IP than the television side of things, Sony and even potentially Apple. Now, Laron, we didn't really with all the things going on, we didn't really get to talk about the big Paramount Skydance acquisition, and there was quite a bit of fallout to that merger. Again, as the story noted here, it was the Skydance merger with Paramount. David Ellison is a notable Trump ally, and this is not Not long after this is when Colbert got the cancellation of Colbert was announced. There has been a pretty big upheaval at a lot of things happening over at Paramount since that merger. So seeing the same name pop up as a potential lead buyer for Warner Brothers seems like a pretty um, noteworthy piece of news to discuss. So, real quick, I have some thoughts, but what is your take on, Warner Brothers Discovery sort of putting it up for sale again, just 4 years after there was the Warner Brothers Discovery merger in the first place?
Well, it kind of feels like, I mean, because before, what I mean, with Hollywood, like you had like maybe two or three studios that kind of ran everything. Like the output was with all these, and it kind of feels like we're coming back to this idea, this regressing, I would say, back to this idea of all of these studios kind of cannibalizing each other, and then all the output being homogenized by a couple of entities that have a very clear agenda for what kind of content they want to see, what kind of content they don't want to see. And it scares me as somebody who, as we're getting so much closer to with the influx of AI and propaganda and everything, that like if it's all going through the same channels, then I don't know realistically, you know what I mean, like how much we're going to be able to trust, or even like, you know what I mean, or engage with the work that we have been thus far in a meaningful way, the way that we have with the diversity of content. You know, it's going to start feeling very much the same. If you've turned on the radio recently, I don't anymore. I don't listen to the radio. I curate my own worlds to live in with my music. But before, when you just had to wait and listen to top 40, a lot of things, just everything just kind of sounds the same. And I think with mergers like this, you're seeing it with the streaming services, like where all of a sudden, like you got to get these bundle deals, and now Hulu is Disney, is everything kind of coming together. Um, without that diversity, it does feel like the certain tech industries and all these things are kind of taking the essence of creativity that we used to love from all of this work, and making it, you know, it's feeling very business oriented and creative second. And so I don't know. I feel like there's a lot to unpack there in terms of like whether, you know, what the future of the content that we get moving forward, and how, and how much of that is going to feel overproduced, or filtrated through people that have a very specific agendas of what they want people to see and hear.
Yeah, I mean, I think as you point out, that this is not the first time Hollywood has gone through this sort of thing where you see, two or three different entities start to gobble up all the smaller studios, and in fact, sometimes to run their own theater chains. Now, the U.S. government stepped in, gosh, I don't know, 70, 80 years ago to kind of break that sort of monopoly up. And here we are again, as you say, tech companies, I would say, being a big part of this as well, although not the only thing that's happening here, but are sort of trying to consolidate as much of the IP under one or two or three umbrellas as possible. And listen, there is the political implications that I think you're alluding to, but I also think there is the creative implications here, which is um, there are fewer jobs when there are fewer studios. As a creative trying to pitch a movie, there are fewer studios in town to pitch your idea to.
And if
You
they don't
know,
like your ideas, if they don't want to hear your story that they perceive to be, and I mean, I keep going back to the political implications, but like if they don't like the content that you're presenting, oh, this is woke or this is whatever, you know what I mean? Like we're going to start getting into a kind of evangelicalized like version of, you know what I mean, where everything's sanitized, everything doesn't have that I don't know, that grit, or that kind of that kind of authenticity that I feel like we've done a really good job of over the years. And I feel like that could regress back to something where it's more wholesome entertainment for everyone to watch. But I think as a culture, we've become more evolved than that. And that's not what people want to see anymore. But,
yeah, I mean, it's and again, I'm trying to remove myself from the political implications, though I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I
sure.
think the fact of the matter is there are less types of things that are going to be made if there are less studios in town to bankroll it. And yes, there's like ideological concerns, like, oh, your film's too woke or should have a message about X, Y, Z. But there's also just things like we just got one battle after another. A movie that, frankly, it was kind of insane that movie got like, I think it was like 130 or 140 million dollar budget, for
Yeah.
Paul Thomas Anderson to make, and that came out of probably years and years and years of paying dues, making a very strategic pitch, getting Leo on board. There's all sorts of like factors that go into that, and if the fewer places there are in town, the less likely studios are going to be to take creative risks for big wins. So, I guess the way I look at it, in addition to the political implications about who's making the call, which I think is valid, I also think it's a net negative for people who just want more variety in storytelling.
Yeah.
If a complaint I hear all the time from, I would say, people who go to 2 or 3 movies a year, and then part of the reason they say they only go to 2 or 3 movies a year is like, oh, they're just kind of rehashing the same stuff over and over again. And I don't necessarily agree with that writ large, but I think there's quite a bit of variety. But there are, if you look at like the big studio tentpole films, the 3 or 4 movies a year people do go to see, they do tend to lean towards more homogenous than say it did 30 years ago. And part of that is because everyone's trying to make safer bets, and there's fewer people making the bets to start with. So I think there's a lot of I think it's a net negative for everyone. It was a net negative whenever AT&T sold to Discovery in 2022,
Yeah.
and I feel like consolidating further under the Skydance Paramount label is both creatively for the industry bad, as just without the political implications, and then you've got the added layer of the Ellisons being the ones who are running the company, which is also like, yeah, that's not great,
And
not great.
any way that they leverage, that power, to, also take away jobs. That's another thing too that's scary. It's like, well, someone that may, like we talked about Colbert, we had that little scare for a moment with um Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah.
Like there's a kind of there's just who's in charge and what have you and what we can say anymore. And what's allowed anymore is also kind of the censorship aspect of it is something that I think is something that we also have to consider, moving forward too. But
And I just want to be very clear when we're talking about Colbert getting canceled. The thing that I want to make sure is very clear: we're not just talking about Stephen Colbert. Stephen
no,
Colbert is. I mean, I'm going to deeply miss him in late night. I have the utmost confidence that he is going to launch something
yeah,
wildly successful after this. But you know what? Colbert employs dozens, if not hundreds, of people to work on his show. And I
yeah,
guarantee you, whatever the next iteration of his show is, it's going to be about 1/10 of the staff, especially if he goes to the internet only model that a lot of these late night folks are talking to, like Conan O'Brien, for example. A lot of the same core team members, but fewer people working on that. It's fewer people who have jobs to pay the bills, to put food on the table for the family, to pay rent or mortgage. And that same principle applies across the studio. If you are Paramount and you go and buy Warner Brothers, well, now you've got 2 PR teams.
yeah,
You've got more production studios that have some overlap in skill sets. Well, it's like, well, and this is just classic business, regardless of industry. Well, we just acquired this. We don't want to duplicate efforts. We don't need all these people to do the same job. So we're going to eliminate half these people from the workforce. And it's less work for everyone. Yeah,
yeah.
top talent like Colbert, like a Jimmy Kimmel. But when those people get let go, it's not just an implication about that individual. It is the people being able to feed their families.
Yep,
Again, dozens, if not hundreds.
the livelihood of the industry around it, because basically the consolidation of all of it, whether it's going to the movie theaters and now you go to a kiosk instead of seeing a person. That means they hire less people at those movie theaters
Hmm.
to I used to be one of those people who ripped someone's ticket and, pick the movie for them or what have you. Now we don't need that, but that means that you have a staff of 5 people running everything. And then sometimes they're not even at the box office or they're not even you got to find them. It's like there's just it's kind of a sad state of the industry when it just feels like it's so impersonal
Yeah.
now. You show up to these things, it's like, and that's again goes back to that conversation about creativity. Like we're losing that aspect of it, to certain degree to just have a more streamlined, content, just content for content's sake and not necessarily for the tactile creativity and ingenuity that comes from actual people working in that space. But yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you also raise up a good point, bringing back the theater change. I mean, this is going to impact everyone, including audiences, because you have to think if there's fewer studios, that means there's less output, which means there's fewer movies screening at theaters, which means there's less opportunity for theaters to make money, which means those theaters hire less people. The economics of all of this are pretty significant.
Yeah,
Again, there is the political component, and I don't want to sell that short because there's some scary, scary, scary stuff happening there. But I also want to just bring it back to, regardless of political ideology, this is a net negative for audiences writ large, I would argue.
yeah, yeah,
So they haven't sold yet officially. It seems like they're taking
yeah.
offers as we speak, last I heard. So
But Paramount is the one in front, right? Is
yeah, the front runner by a considerable margin, which is concerning.
Yeah,
Um, well, maybe I will say at least the creators of South Park, Stone and Parker, got their big fat paycheck with that one after the merger closed. But
yeah,
yeah. Well, enough on that. Let's keep the positive news going, Laron. Because speaking
sure.
of the economics of the business writ large, so the box office is in trouble. So I'm going to read this a couple snippets from this story published by Variety this past week. Will Zootopia 2, Avatar, Fire and Ash, and other holiday hopefuls salvage the 2025 box office? So again, this is a snippet from Variety. This year was supposed to cement the great box office reset. Instead, 2025 has fallen short of that promise. Winter, that is January and February, were bleak. And although the spring surged and summer was decent, the fall season has been downright tragic. With an inconsistent supply of hits, waning interest in once reliable franchises, and stars losing their sizzle, it's been a volatile 11 months at the theaters. And I want to note here, October 2025, we have seen the dust settle on that, and it is in fact the lowest performing October at the box office in over 30 years, like since the 90s, which is just bananas when you think about inflation and all of that. It's pretty dire. The story continues. At this point, domestic revenues are just 3% ahead of last year. And that might not seem so bad, except that grosses in 2024 were 23.5% behind pre pandemic times. So there's this mounting pressure on a trio of holiday releases: Wicked for Good and Disney's animated Zootopia at Thanksgiving, as well as James Cameron's sci fi epic Avatar Fire and Ash at Christmas, to salvage a wildly inconsistent year. One last thing here, just to provide some context of hits and misses this year. Back in January, analysts predicted that North American box office would enjoy the best year since COVID, with $9.3 billion and $9.5 billion. Audiences did not get the memo. Yes, we had Lilo and Stitch, which made a little over $1 billion, a Minecraft movie that made $957 million, and Jurassic World Rebirth, 868 million. These were certified blockbusters. We also had some surprises like F1 the movie, which made 631 million, Sinners at 367 million, and Weapons at 268 million. These were all sleeper hits, but those wins were not enough to offset several big budget blunders, including, I cannot believe this movie came out this year, Captain America: Brave New World made 415 million against a budget of 180 million. Tron: Ares made 141 million against a budget of 180 million, and Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, which made 598 million against a budget of over 400 million. Those films lost tens of millions of dollars when marketing costs are taken into account, since theaters are getting to keep half of the ticket sales. So projections, last thing on this, projections for the year were revised down to 9 billion, which would rank just above 2024's 8.7 billion and slightly behind 2023, which had a post-COVID record of 9.04, and still way behind the pre-pandemic heights of 10.5 billion to 11 billion. All right. So, yeah. So, Laron, we do this like once, maybe twice a year. We just check in on the business, and it seems pretty dire, I would say, because the putting
Yeah.
all of your hope on three blockbusters, one of them an Avatar movie, which I'm enthusiastic about, but we just never know how those are going to perform. What is your read on this?
I feel like it's interesting. We keep talking about evolving or like snapping back to a previous number, and I just think that after COVID, I just think like the molecular structure of everything just got obliterated, and it is never going to be the same. And I think as long as we can acknowledge that as an industry, then we got to think about what we can do, what we can salvage at this point. Because I think interests are shifting. I think the economy again is really bad. Movies are super expensive. I mean, I went to the movies with a group of 5 people. We spent almost $300, and that so it's like that is not cost effective for families to go see things. You know what I mean? Like, so people are very trepidatious with where they're going to spend their money, where they're going to spend their resources. And on top of that, we have just an influx of streaming everywhere. There's so many different ways to consume content. You can wait just a couple of weeks, maybe sometimes up to a month, and get some of those bigger films to even drop on those sites. So I think of the theater experience, theatrical experience being like going back to what it used to be as the primary way that people consume or watch media, it's just not gonna happen. We don't have the attention spans for it. TikTok ruined everything. Like like we're
It really
just
did.
it really did. I mean, like, we have short attention spans. I hear people complain about the length of movies all the time. Why is this movie 3 hours long? But I was like, you watch 8 hours, you binge television at home. But
Same people just watched the first 4 episodes of Stranger Things in one sitting.
I'm
Yeah,
like, you
yeah.
just sat 4 hours at home and you didn't move from the couch even to go to the bathroom. So, like, what do you mean you can't sit and watch? It's just it. It's. I think we changed after COVID. Something happened with our brain. Something happened with the industry. Something happened with the model. And I think moving forward, I mean, like, we're seeing like people do show up in spurts for certain things. Like, obviously, Wicked's doing very good. Sinners did very good for being an original film, originally creative source. And I think that there are certain things that people will go out of their way to go see. And I do think that it's just going to be it's kind of like an ever evolving kind of situation where it's going to be situational to this movie, to that movie, to this IP, to that one. There are some that just have the juice. And then there are some that have been waning over time, and we're just not going to get there again. And so it's cynical to say all that, but I do think that if if that is the goal ultimately, is to continue going to movie theaters, I just think that that's probably like a fool's errand, at this point. So I think now we need to find a way to eventize that theatrical experience, make it something worthwhile to go see outside of just the latest Marvel movie or the latest whatever that is. Like, there has to be another reason to go to the movies these days. And I think we're kind of seeing that with the nostalgic picks. Like, how people, like, why are they playing old movies now? They're trying everything. They're throwing everything out of the kitchen sink to try and get people back in the theaters. Maybe that movie that they loved 25 years ago, and it's
I mean,
all,
Interstellar had an anniversary release earlier this year, I think, and I heard it made like really good money. So some of those do bring in decent
yeah,
amounts of extra cash. Definitely not enough to save the box office. I mean, I heard Back to the Future had its big 40th anniversary recently, and that seemed to draw folks out. Here's what I agree with everything you said. In fact, I think you put it really eloquently, which is, that scene of the Joker and the Dark Knight, Heath Ledger. He's like, "You've changed things. There's no going back." Like the
yeah,
cops, they're just trying to take things back to how they were, but and I know that there is no going back. We're in the new world. We've evolved. Okay, and
yeah,
the reality is, and I think there was a couple years we were like trying to feel out, well, is it gonna rubber band back, or are we in uncharted territory? And I don't know if it's completely uncharted territory, but here's the thing. Um, we have for a solid 20 to 25 years, studios have been placing bigger and bigger bets on tentpole films, making fewer films because they want bigger wins. They don't just want to they don't want to make money. They want everything to make monster money. And Steven Spielberg and George Lucas warned us about this about 10 years ago. They say, hey, this is a failing business model. Because what's going to happen is you're going to have fewer winners and lots of losers, and ultimately those losers are going to disappear, which sort of ties into the thing we were just talking about. Part of the reason these acquisitions are happening is because some of these companies are not making enough money to justify their own existence,
yeah,
despite sitting on very valuable IP. So what we're seeing now is things have changed, and I think this is I don't know whether the executives smoking the cigars at the table saying, give me more K-pop demon hunters. I don't know if they're thinking this way,
yeah,
but the opportunity I see it is we go back to doing more down the middle budget films, which
yeah,
is, hey, maybe not. We don't need to give Marvel $400 million to make Avengers Doomsday. What if we made 4 $100 million movies that are also still big events? They're just not $400 million.
I think we got
Um,
greedy. That's what I think. I think we got greedy. They want to see
mhm,
maximum profit, and they no longer care about the actual. I mean, the idea of art and commerce is always colliding. We don't have an industry without the money. That's fair to say. But also, I miss the 90s when we would go to the movies and see a mid-budget, could just be a rom-com, it could be a heist movie, it could be like, you know what I mean? Like just and and those movies endured, and they stayed, and some of them become classics, like, but it's all about like the biggest spectacle of spectacles, the largest tempo, and then like your expectations are up through the roof, and then you kind of meet halfway there, and it's like, like a couple things are going to exceed your expectations, but overall, like we should be going to the movies for that escapist artistic journey that we're going
right.
through, and not just about the studio's bottom lines. But yeah,
Or the biggest spectacle. It's not all about spectacle. At a certain point, you get desensitized to all the spectacle. There has to be compelling stories that you're telling there. And the other reality is the things that were. I mean, Marvel. I mean, gosh, Hollywood was built on Marvel for a decade.
yeah,
And we've talked about this with the Fantastic Four review. That movie made okay money, but like the heyday of I can put a mediocre superhero movie out and make $1 billion. That is not coming back.
yeah,
And I think what that means is, frankly, I think studios have been in the last couple of years just been like, I don't know what works anymore. I mean,
yeah,
Barbie was a huge hit. Oppenheimer was a huge hit. On paper, those are not movies that make as much money as a superhero movie, and yet
yeah,
Minecraft made almost $1 billion. And again, I bring up K-pop Demon Hunters. Now that one didn't make as much money, but it did make $20 million in one weekend without AMC. I will say when it did get its limited theatrical, and that is something to be said about that. So there is the eventizing that you pointed out. I think it's the readjusting budgets, audiences sort of, I think, readjusting expectations, and studios trying to get a lot, keep the bar high for what you greenlight and greenlight more things, and we get maybe give us some more sinners. Yeah,
yeah. Do you think? And I'll ask you this question: do you think that because it just occurred to me while we were having this conversation, like, do you think the oversaturation of everything at once, like as soon as they found something that worked, and it sold through the roof, and now that we have got our fill of that kind of junk food for so long at this point, that we're just numb to it. We're not excited by it anymore. There's some things we'll show up for. There's some things everyone has their favorite thing, that they'll show up for, but because it's been so oversaturated, the reason why these bigger things aren't working anymore is we basically we're stuffed. We're stuffed with all of it, and we no longer, you know what I mean? Like,
I think it's a lot of I don't even it's just a lot of mediocre stuff we've been getting for, like, in
yeah,
terms of like the big blockbusters. Now there are of course exceptions. We've talked about them on the show. The big hits, Barbie was magnificent, Oppenheimer was magnificent. I'm trying to think of another. Like, there are lots of success stories.
yeah,
I mean, the Batman in 2022. There are lots of success
yeah,
stories of really top-notch IP-driven films being very good. I thought Superman was really good. But the thing is, overwhelmingly, I think for a solid decade, audiences were just getting fed a lot of very mediocre Marvel movies, along with a lot of even worse DC movies, and anyone else who is chasing the superhero bubble. But it's not just the superheroes. That's a big part of it. It's the IP mining that happened for the 80s, and to a lesser extent the 90s, and comics, like all that stuff. It was so much for so long, and frankly, the overwhelming amount of it, whether or not there are good things to say about them or not, were not very exceptional. And at a certain point, you're just like, I've seen it. I'm done. I want to move on. What's
yeah.
new?
And same with
And
the
then,
reboots too. Like, I
yeah,
mean,
oh
the
yeah,
also, yeah, just a lot of the reboots, remakes, reimaginings, all those things. It's just become so. How many different timelines with this same franchise can we do before we're like, okay, I've seen enough. I don't need.
right. Well, maybe even going into the Scream franchise, you and I talk about this all the time. One of our biggest concerns with the franchise is that they favor release velocity over creative ideas, right? And that's one of the franchises that has been so far, knock on all the wood, generally speaking, there hasn't been a bad one, and generally speaking, there's all different levels of like good, right, to great. And I think that's because they've been a lot pickier with how often they release them and, the creative perspective, the point of view they bring into them. Whereas I don't think most franchises have had that sort of discipline,
Yeah.
frankly.
The
And yeah.
discipline, yeah, is a good point, yeah.
Mhm.
It's like when we should release, how long should we wait between these? Now they may be losing that traction if they go into a new trilogy just now, but that
We'll
being
see.
said,
Yeah.
up to this point, it's kind of been this like magic trick they've been able to upkeep for as long as they have. But not like you said, every franchise has not been as successful with doing that. So
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting space we're in with movies in general. Because I do think 20 years from now, when we think of the 2000s, we're like, what was that? I guess a lot of this, like a lot of noise, just a
Mhm.
lot of noise. You know what I mean? Like, but if you go to the 90s, you can pick like your Forrest Gumps or your Pulp Fiction or
Mm.
your Saving Private Ryan's. These movies that stood the test of time, and then we come here and it's like there's Parasite, but you know what I'm saying? But you know what I
Right.
mean? But you really gotta mine through all the noise to really think about like what took up all of the stratosphere during that period of time. And a lot of it was like you said, IP driven spectacle that's like you said, for the most part pretty mediocre, so
Yeah, mediocre at best, a lot of it, I would say. I guess, Laron, just to kind of put a pin in this, maybe I put a pin, to lead us into our next topic, which is very dear to our Fast family heart. What do you think audiences should do?
about
Like
what
audiences are like, yeah, the box office receipts are down. What do you want me to do? Show up for bad movies? Or,
I look, I'm a radical when it comes to this. I'm like boycott all these movies until they start making better movies. But I don't. I'm not very motivating in that regard because I think I'm probably too smug and cynical about it. But I that's what I feel like we have to do. I mean, like they only hear what with their pockets, and so the thing is if we stop showing up to these movies and we go to movies like Sinners and we go to movies like some of these more original, then that's they're gonna go wherever the money train is going, and so long as we show up for mediocre movies in droves, they're gonna keep making mediocre movies in droves, and so it really is like I think there's power in what we spend our time and our money on. And I think that works in many facets of life, whether that's politically or whatever. It's like what we show up and what we support is where they're going to go.
Mhm.
Um,
Totally.
so
And and again, I don't want to make it sound like, oh, where I'm down on IP. I don't think all IP created films are bad. In fact, a movie we're not going to get to talk about on this show in depth, but I thought Predator Badlands was a phenomenal use of an IP that seems like it's kind of past its heyday, and
yeah,
Dan Trachtenberg pulled a couple magic tricks for that one, tricks with that one in my opinion. So I'm not saying IP equal bad. What I'm saying is I think studios have taken for granted because it's IP, people will show up because they recognize it. And the
exactly.
reality is that's only
You can't
really
phone it in. You still
yeah,
have to. There still has to be creativity here.
yes.
If
Yeah.
you're gonna bring it out the IP, then do something interesting with it. Don't just you know what I mean. Copy paste the next thing. New characters, new space. It's like that doesn't work anymore. So
Yeah. Well, speaking of how studios should adjust to the new like status quo, the Fast family is in trouble, Laron. Near and dear to our hearts, the Fast
man, aren't
franchise.
they?
10
Yeah.
movies in. You and I have been passionate fans of, totally eyes wide open about what exactly these are. They are the comfort junk food that I have no problem consuming. But there's been some news that broke in October. So this is going to be old hat for people who are on the internet a lot. But maybe if not, if you haven't heard about this, well, you probably, if you're a big fan of the franchise, you're wondering, so when's that next one going to come out? And maybe if you're not a big fan of the franchise, you're like, why haven't I heard about another one yet? They seem like they wouldn't stop coming for years. Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to pull a couple snippets from a story. It's a recap written by Yahoo, but it's largely based on a Wall Street Journal article that got published in October. So, from the Yahoo story, it's been a few years now since a Fast and Furious movie roared into theaters as Fast X opened in cinemas back in spring of 2023. That latest installment was touted as the first chapter of a two-part conclusion, and since then, fans have been waiting for developments on the final flick. Now, this past summer at Fuel Fest, which is an event that celebrates the Fast and Furious movie, movies, Vin Diesel appeared and not only declared that the 11th film would still happen, but that three specific things would have to happen. Diesel claimed the film would, number one, return Dominic Toretto and company back to Los Angeles. Number two, shift the focus back to street racing culture. And number three, bring back the character of Brian O'Connor, who is played by the late Paul Walker, who, again, famously died in 2013 tragically in a car wreck. However, so that's what Vin Diesel's saying. However, a source tells the Wall Street Journal that a script has yet to be locked in. Unnamed individuals also alleged to the Wall Street Journal that members of the Fast and Furious cast have yet to sign deals to return for the final film. Additionally, it is said that a release date has still yet to be determined by Universal Pictures. So executives purportedly want the filmmaker to find a way to make Fast 11 in a more affordable manner compared to the more recent installments. Back in 2023, Fast X did not fare well at the box office as it finished its run with a global haul of $705 million against a reported budget of around $340 million. The Louis Leterrier directed film became the fifth highest grossing movie of that year, but it also marked the Fast and Furious franchise's lowest haul at the box office in a decade. And with that, execs reportedly want a $200 million budget for Fast 11, so that even if the box office total isn't super high, the film could still theoretically turn a profit. So, Laron, there is what Vin Diesel said. There's what we've been expecting based on what was told to us on the press tour for Fast X, which is this is part one of two. And I think we even said on the podcast when we reviewed this one, when you do a two-parter, it sort of implies that you already know what you're going to do for part two. You know,
Yeah.
there's the creative component, and then there's how Vin Diesel was. And in fact, at one point on the press tour, he's like, "Well, we might even make it a trilogy now."
Yeah.
There's what he said then. It's what he's saying now, which is it sounds like, oh, there was a pause, but we've worked it out. And then there's what is being reported by insiders, which is Universal does not seem to have any confidence that this movie is going to be made anytime soon, at least until they get the budget down. And even then, once you get the budget down, it's still like 2 years out, minimally. So what is your read on what's happening here?
Well, first, Vin Diesel is a terrible, an unreliable narrator as it pertains to what's going on with this franchise. So don't listen to him. That's what I'd say first. I also think like you and I have had this conversation because like we're fans of this franchise again. Also, as you mentioned, kind of acknowledging what it is. It's kind of a silly. I don't know. I would call it like our adult or teenage version of Saturday morning cartoons in certain ways. Once the franchise kind of figured out like what it was and kind of honed into like what was possible with this particular IP, and it had the self-awareness about it, then we really embraced it. But we are also very we're at the point with this franchise where like give me one stinker and I'll walk away from it
Oh
all.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah. Well, you and I talked about this on the show too. Fate of the Furious nearly killed my interest in any more of these movies. That's the
Right.
eighth one, by the way,
And
because it was bad, and I was like, well, I don't. You know what? I think we could just not
we
pick it
could
back up.
just exactly. So it's like our loyalty to this is very fickle.
Yes.
It's not like we're not married to this franchise in the ways that we are some of the larger, more enduring ones. Like this is definitely something that it's like you got to strike while the momentum's hot sort of thing, and my interest in it is very like I'm any moment I could drift over here. So like honestly, I feel like them losing so much time between this and the last one is actually detrimental to, because like I said, we're not as married to this IP as other people are. I mean, as most people are not married to this IP, like they are other ones. And so, I actually think that, yeah, like, I don't know when we're going to get this film, if we are at all. But I also think that, they left us on such a huge cliffhanger. That last one was not a great one.
Spoilers for Fast X. It literally ends with Vin Diesel and his kid driving down the Hoover Dam with like a giant explosion happening behind them, and you don't. It's like literally the definition of an old Western
Yeah.
serialized cliffhanger. Like tune in next week to find out if they survive the cliff jump.
Yeah.
Like
It's
that's
it's
where it ends.
it's not even like oh, well, we can interpret something. It's like it is incomplete. The story is incomplete. And so like if we never get it, it's really gonna suck because like, there'll be a really bitter taste in our mouths about how they just botched that entire thing. But it does sound like, again, as we're talking about greed and how much money they think they need to make this, I agree. I want a more stripped back version of this, but it's kind of hard to know how to do that with where they left things. You know what I mean? Like, so, because it left
Well,
in a
that's also
very,
that's also the thing. It's like, well, I don't know, and we've talked about this too. It's almost like Pandora's box when it comes to the silly over the topness, because it's like, on one hand, I actually think the series could survive by going back to the basics. Don't make it about saving the world or any of the spy stuff. Just make it like the Cannonball Run, or
yeah,
or just a street racing movie with smaller stakes, smaller budget, smaller stakes with characters. But you can't with the way they left it, you can't just all right, then the 11th one, we're just going to do that. It's like, no, you set up these massive, massive stakes that we have that creatively kind of have to be paid off before you can then do that other thing. Maybe.
absolutely, yeah. So it's kind of a mess. Everything's kind of a mess. The backstage politics is a mess. The story where they left it is a mess, and it's just kind of hard to know how it can be salvaged at this point, especially if there's some infighting and also the idea that, like, this we have to make it for this amount of money, and it's like, I mean, I don't know. Like you said, that last one didn't do as well, right? Like, so it's kind of hard to make a strong case for why they need more money to close it out.
Well,
So
and the thing about, I think part of what makes this franchise so expensive too is the number of movie stars that they have signed, like, I guess, incorporated in the characters. And again, it's one of those like, well, if they left it in a different place at the end of Fast X, maybe they could have written a lot of these characters out to kind of help get the budget down. But it's like, no, like we literally just brought back another
yeah,
dead character, like
they're
that
literally
also is way
hanging
more
from the
expensive than they
rafters.
were. Yeah, The Rock came back in the post credit scene. I mean, it's just like I don't know how you're gonna like thread that needle of like not pay these people as much
Yeah,
money and get the budget down. And there's so many of them
yeah.
too.
They
So
bit off more than they can chew, and then they got themselves in a pickle, and now it's kind of an impossible thing to. So I'll be very curious to see. I can't imagine whatever we get is going to be great. But you
I
know,
also get the sense, and I could be wrong. And you and I are among the most diehard people into this franchise. And again, you and I both are also like, yeah, but if we didn't like get another one, I wouldn't be like, we could walk away. It really
yeah,
wouldn't hurt me to walk away at this point at all. Um, I don't foresee that it's kind of similar to how I feel about that, frankly, the Avengers Doomsday movie coming out. I just don't know if there's enough interest left in the general populace to justify a massive price tag. I feel like, for lack of a better pun, the franchise is kind of out of gas. Like
yeah,
audiences are kind of, I
yeah,
mean, it's been diminishing return since the seventh movie, and we're on the 11th movie.
yep.
It doesn't, even if they did get it out, unless they got that budget down dramatically, I really just don't see it making a ton of money because I don't know who all. There are dozens of us at this point, Laron. Dozens of us who at a
Dozens,
moment's notice could
and
just be
you've
like,
heard them all on this podcast at one point.
yes.
They're all they're all on here. We're the
Yeah.
last ones.
So I don't know. I could be wrong. Maybe the audiences they get that first trailer out and everyone all of a sudden I realize there's tons of Fast and Furious fans. But I'll say right now, I just can't imagine that it would
Yeah,
make more than Fast X, which already itself was making less than the previous entries. So
I predict it'll make it'll have just middling box rep. It's not going to surpass anything.
right.
It's either gonna come just under this one or kind of right where this one did. Because I don't think this franchise was going up. It was always going down. You know what I mean? Like after a certain point, after 8, I'd say,
Yeah.
really it kind of just stopped. It stopped having that.
Well, it goes back to what you're saying. Audiences getting tired of mediocre IP for IP's sake. And as much as you and I are kind of like appreciate some of the like meta silliness of it, like in
Yeah,
general, I wouldn't say these are exceptional movies that are reinventing the wheel. Like
yeah.
they're
And I think
yeah,
audience just get their feel of it at some point. Like you said, like you're like, okay, I've gotten 8 of these. Yeah, I'll see another one if you make one. But also, you know what I mean? Like now that I've been, stuffed with so much of it, there's not, you know what I mean? I'm not clamoring for more. You know what
right.
I mean? Like, so yeah.
So here's the last question. When do you think we're going to get this movie? Because I do think there's too much money at stake. I think they will find a way. I'm not saying it's going to be creatively good or interesting way, but I do think we're going to get it at some point.
I think we are going to be force fed a dreadful or mediocre finale to this. Within 5 years. I'll say that. I don't
It's
think we'll.
so long though.
I don't think 2 years. You said 2 years minimum. I think it's going to be longer than that because there's a lot of hurdles to get
Well,
over.
that's if it's greenlit like tomorrow,
Right.
and it's nose to the grindstone sort of thing. Like there, and I don't think that's going to happen.
So margin of error here. Then I'll say 2 years minimum in best case scenario, and so I'm going to add 2 more years to that. So I'm going to say it's going to be somewhere in 4 to 5 years from now.
So Laron's saying it's like 2029 territory. I was
Yeah.
going to go 2028. I agree with this, and I think it's going to be mediocre, not very good. And I think we'll get it in 2028, and I think it'll be a swan song.
They
I hope.
probably have to rush it. You're right, because this is like we can only milk anything out of this. We have like a 3-year window, like because
Well, it's already 2 years since we got the last 2.5 years at this point since we got the last one. So
that's
you
true.
add another 3 years on it. That's 5.5 years between entries in a franchise that honestly is pretty consistently put out an entry every 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, you're
Um,
right. So 3 is probably a safer bet, especially given that it's been 2 years already. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm thinking 5 years since the end, but I'm forgetting that
yeah.
it's been some time since the last one ended. So yeah,
I don't blame you for that either, though, because again, there's not a green like approved script that we know of, though. So it's not like, oh, it's going into production in May. That changes things a little bit. It's like we don't know when it's going into production. We don't know what the internal release date actually is. Like
yeah,
it really could be 2029.
which
I'm leaning towards A,
screams
but yeah,
which screams something that it's not going to be good.
no.
That's what it
I just
says.
want to reiterate to you, and we've talked about this with a lot of part twos. When you make a part one, part two, and you market it that way, that implies that you already have a pretty clear idea, and in fact, you might even be partway done shooting the part two. In this case, it was like, nope, they hadn't gotten that far yet.
Right.
Bizarre. Well, ladies and gentlemen, what do you think of the state of Hollywood? What do you think of the Fast family? You can let us know by sending us an email at thecinematropolis@gmail.com. You can hit us up on Instagram, the Cinematrop, or you can like and subscribe on YouTube if you're tuning in there. With all that said, Laron, on the note of mediocre Hollywood slop, I think it's time for us to get to our review of Wicked for Good.
Elva Withrop, I know you're out here. Just come in before the monkeys spot you.
There's no going back. This is between us, the wizard, and I.
Okay, sorry, Laron. That was a low blow. Low blow.
No, I got
low
you.
blow,
No,
low blow.
someone's laughing somewhere.
So I am with the new format. I'm walking away from IMDb because I have determined that their new synopses are so bad, oftentimes incomplete sentences. So we are not pulling synopses from anywhere on the internet. So according to the internet, Wicked for Good is described as Glinda and Elphaba's friendship is tested as they become fugitives of the wizard's regime and eventually go their separate ways. A few fun facts about Wicked for Good. So this is a sequel to last year's Wicked Part 1, and it adapts the second half of the musical of the same name. Again, this is Wicked for Good, not Wicked Part 2. I'm starting to think that the Part 1 was forced by a studio executive to throw that into Part 1. Anyway, Part 1, as a reminder, huge hit last year. It was released November 22nd, 2024, and made $759 million against a $150 million budget. This film reunites the entire cast from Part 1, including Ariana Grande as Glinda, Cynthia Erivo as Elphaba, Jonathan Bailey as Fiyero, Ethan Slater as Bach, Bowen Yang is Bowen Yang is that character's name I still can't say. Michelle Yeoh as Madame Morble and Jeff Goldblum as the Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Again, this film is directed by Jon M, whose previous credits include Step Up to the Streets, G.I. Joe Retaliation. As we were recently reminded, Now You See Me 2, Crazy Rich Asians, and In the Heights. And so far to date, as of this recording, the film has already grossed $327 million against a budget of $150 million. And this is about 2 weeks after the release. So the hit train is not going to stop coming for Wicked for Good. Now, Laron, there was no way we were not going to talk about Wicked for Good on this show. So we're talking about a week later than I probably would typically. But this is a movie that is, I am understand is very important to you. I know you loved the first one, or loved a lot about it at least, and have a lot of thoughts to share on the story. And it's also going to be one of the biggest hits of the year. So there was no way we weren't going to talk about this movie. That said, I have to be honest in saying after part two, and I'll elaborate here more in a minute. I've decided Wicked is firmly not my shit, for lack of a better phrase.
Your
So,
shiz, you
wait,
mean?
my shiz. There we go. It's not my shiz. There we go. That said, bring the positivity, Laron. Tell me, what did you think of Wicked for Good?
Well, I think the first thing that's important, because I mean, we've even said it at the top here, like, this is a sequel. It's not a sequel. And that's important because I really do think, like, when you think of this as a continuation of a story and not just the concluding minutes of the same story that we got before, then you're thinking of it with a 3-act structure and all of that. But really, this is that that final piece of the last story. And so I do think that that's inherently an issue with them separating these two movies. I understand that there would be a lot to consolidate to make one film here. I don't think either one of these movies stands completely firmly on its own on its own with the separation here. But I do think cumulatively that these movies have a lot to say with each other. And I do think that Jon M really did take this, and he created a visual spectacle out of this. He made something very cinematic out of this. When the trailers for this movie came out, I was certain that I was not going to be a fan of it, actually. I wasn't a fan of the marketing for it. I liked certain people involved with it. I thought people like Ariana Grande was a head scratcher for me. And then I saw the movie, you know what I mean? So I think I'm surprised by how much I was taken by this franchise, or by this story. Um, Considering I don't think I was the target audience for it, if that makes sense. And I think that has a lot to do with the two leads in this movie, because I really, really do think that what is resonating the most, because I've seen the play, only one time in preparation for the first movie. I'm not a Wicked stan. I should say that. I didn't read the book because I'm not somebody who's, been on this train for as long as it's been popular. There you go.
Popular.
Popular. But I do think that Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande, they just bring a soulfulness and a kind of a bigger depth to what could be very airy and fluffy and kind of just not entirely impactful or meaningful or what have you. And I think that they really do resonate for me as two really iconic characters now that people will remember for years going on. But as far as Wicked for Good goes, it's inherently, as the second act is, even for people who watch the play, they always say the second act, doesn't have all the great songs, doesn't have all the funny lines, doesn't have all the. It's definitely much darker than the first chapter. The first one's all whimsy and smiles and kind of, and then this one's all doom and gloom and what have you. But I think that's a necessary kind of duality that these two things needed to have, because the first one's very much more Elphaba's story, and this one's very much more Glinda's story. And so I think the fact that they even managed to infuse ideas of like authoritarianism, fascism, or systemic racism, and all those different things like propaganda into something that, let's be real, I mean, this is PG content, you know what I mean? Like, so this is intended by and large for a younger audience. So the fact that they're even taking weighty concepts like that and putting it in something like this, it's like a very beloved IP, I think is honorable in many ways, because I do think that it makes it kind of, they're not easy concepts for kids to get. And I think that if you can find that, find a way to make that palatable to a younger audience is, I mean, I think that's noteworthy. But so I'm a fan of this without saying, while honestly acknowledging that I do think this one is a star down from the next one, but I anticipated that. So.
Okay. I think that's all well said. And I think I agree with you on a few of those things. So let me just start with this. Oh, okay. Start with this disclaimer. Actually, I understand that this the musical, and by extension, these two movies mean a lot to a very large demographic of people that I am not a part of. And the world is kind of crazy right now. And I will tell you what, the amount of joy that I witnessed from people walking out of the movie theater, Wicked for Good, um, specifically people who probably have a theater background, specifically for women, people in the queer communities. I do not want to take that away from any of them. However, I also do not like this movie. Kind of seals the deal for me. I really don't like these movies. What I do like, you've already said it. I think that Wicked for Good has some incredible emotional highs. And part one, it was, the Defying Gravity, which was no surprise. That was the musical number everyone was hyping, and it delivered the goods. I had to sit through way too much movie to get there, but it paid off. It was a magnificent moment. The performance from Erivo was fantastic. I think there's a couple of musical numbers in this film that are similarly, the emotional highs are just top tier. Mostly Cynthia Erivo's musical numbers, I would say. That said, I do think Ariana Grande brings a lot of surprising nuance to what I would consider on paper to be a pretty vapid role. Honestly, doesn't seem like the character has a ton of interiority aside from the sort of nuances and sort of the way that Grande reacts to certain things. They try to give her a little bit in this, with flashbacks. I won't spoil all that, but it just did not work for me at all. The performance is what sells it for me, not the script. And I also think Jon M is directing the heck out of these movies. You can see it's a big vision. It's ambitious. And the amount of coordination to get a musical of this scale together successfully at all, this feels like a miracle at times. And to that, I say kudos to everyone who worked on it. That is the end of the nice things I will be saying about Wicked for Good, or either of the Wicked movies, because Wicked for Good, at the end of Wicked, I said, okay, there's a lot of things that really annoy me about this. I think the writing is very cringy a lot of the time. Everything from the way the story is delivered to some of the dialogue and even some of the names they give it, it reads very much like internet fan fiction to me. That's how it plays for me. Not to demean people who like that. I'm just saying that was kind of where I was like, I feel like a teenager wrote this on the internet when they were 15. It's kind of how it feels a lot of the time from a scripting perspective. And part two only furthered that belief that the writing is terrible, because you have, not only do you have the annoying ticks and stuff I have, the fan fiction thing, they doubled down on it in this movie. Again, I don't want to spoil anything specifically, but there's a lot of inclusions of Wizard of Oz story beats, like characters like the Tin Man or the Lion, these things that feel shoehorned into the movie as if I've got to include it so people know it's part of Wizard of Oz, and I'm going to give it this weird twist, but then not emotionally pay off on that inclusion in any sort of meaningful way. So I'm like, why did you even bother putting it in the story? So it just doesn't feel thought through from a characterization perspective. And it's not revealing anything new about the Wizard of Oz that I didn't know before. And on top of that, I personally think that there are things from the first movie, again, thematically, that I think have a lot of potential. This idea that the characters who are perceived as the ultimate good and ultimate evil in the universe go to school together, and they learn from one another, and they are on the paths that they end up on because of one another. That's potentially rich storytelling. This movie, I think, completely undermined all of the work that was done in part one on that. There's a whole song in the movie about, in order for you to be good, I have to be evil. And that's poppycock. That's terrible. That's so dumb. It's so dumb. It's bad. It's ideologically bankrupt. And frankly, if a teenager watched it and walked away thinking, well, if there's got to be good in the world, there's got to be evil, I would be like, no, bad, stop. That's not true. Bad idea. And I think this movie, I don't think it's maliciously putting those ideas out there. I'm saying it puts them out there and doesn't really think any of them through. And then on top of that, to put ice cherry on the cake from the writing perspective for me, and I won't spoil it, but there are, I do like certain of these characters a lot. I do think Elphaba and Glinda are very, because of the performances largely, are really memorable, iconic characters and versions of these characters. The there was room for an emotional payoff I could have gotten behind and looked past a lot of the other shortcomings I've already mentioned. And the movie's like, hey, but what if we gave fans a happier ending instead of like making good on stuff? So yeah, not a fan. Not a fan of any of that stuff. And so that's why I say I want to take a step back and say, if this brings you joy, do not let my opinion derail your enjoyment. If it gets you out of bed or makes your day a little better, I'm happy for you. But I have to be honest with myself, and then I think that the writing is very, very bad. Not only is it like bad from a prose perspective, but I think it's really bad from a like storytelling perspective writ large. That said, the musical numbers are kind of showstoppers multiple times, and the performances are like 10x better than the script has any right to be. So there are things to consider on that part. Anyway, soapbox over. I thank you for enduring that, Laron.
Yeah.
I do have to ask though, like from your perspective, did you think were you satisfied with where this ended up, or like maybe to a deeper related question with how the musical ends?
Well, I think also what's interesting too is I don't know for the most part, like if you're unfamiliar with this source, you know what I mean? Like then all this was new information to you as it came into play. Although of course this book has been around for as long as we've existed, like so this iteration of the story has always been kind of a tongue-in-cheek wink wink nudge nudge at the whole,
Yeah, Frank L. Baum universe.
yeah, it's always been
No,
in many ways a satire in that regard of that material, while also utilizing the same characters, if that makes sense. So, like Dorothy famously only has one line on the Broadway play. Like and that's intentional. It's very much like this isn't your story. We don't care. You know what I mean? Like there's kind of this idea that those iconic characters you know from Oz. You know what I mean? Like this is definitely its own like tangentially related, but not really. It's not a prequel
well,
in the like sense that it's
yeah.
like this is the beginning before everything happened. Yes, but also like what you thought you knew about these things is also kind of is kind of rubbish. So I don't know if you look at it as like actually a prequel, then it's probably it doesn't align perfectly in that way. But if you look at it as like a tongue in cheek kind of skewering of it all together, then that's more so what I think
See,
it's going for.
I hear what you're saying, but I also don't think it's very tongue in cheek. Like I mean, the Dorothy stuff, sure, but like the Tin Man stuff, I was like, whoa, this. By the way, this got real dark real fast. Like in like the execution of some of the shooting, I was like, this is way past tongue in cheek. This is like,
Yeah, there
it's so and it's like, but why? But they go there a couple of times, and I'm like, well, why? Why is that? Why did you do that with that character who ultimately doesn't meaningfully play into the larger story? I guess it's just weird. It feels like a weird side inclusion. You know.
I do think this is also like chewing on some deeper things. I do feel like it is trying to say something. Like you mentioned, like the idea that she had to be bad versus good. I mean, I heard your critique of that, but I also think that that is not unlike what kind of the landscape that we're living in right now. And I think it has a more pointed kind of cynical idea of like realistically, like you have to make a villain for whatever. I love the line, like we're not in spoilers yet, but um with the wizard, essentially saying like we could tell people the truth. They're not going to believe it though at this point. And I think there's something sobering about that because I've had a couple conversations with people who live and breathe everything that's going on politically right now. And no matter what facts or truths I bring to them, no matter how many times I disprove their points, they want to believe the fiction. They want to believe that this person cares about them and that he's doing everything for good, for the good of the people that they care about, or the causes they care about. Even though I can say unequivocally that he doesn't and he doesn't care. But I think that that's interesting because that's true. That's honest. That's how people operate. And so I think that it's not giving you that fairy tale, ending where it's like, well, let's just say everything and let's all just come together and admit that we lied about this and she's good and all this stuff like that. But that would be, I think that would not ring true to, like what we're seeing right now, especially. So,
Yeah, I have thoughts. I'll save them for spoilers.
yeah.
Because I still don't totally agree. I hear what you're saying. I
Yeah,
do. I think what I like what you're saying. I think the movie is kind of doing that, but then ultimately chooses to do a different thing, and that's where I get kind of frustrated.
sure.
Because it's instead of sort of meaningfully paying off on some of those ideas, it sort of tries to have its cake and eat it too. And at least for me, that really did not work. It really sort of like it made me wonder what was the point of bringing up the things like fascism. What was the point of bringing up these things in the text without it meaningfully without the characters' choices meaningfully impacting the state of the world. Maybe that is the point, and something we can talk about further as well. But okay, so but overall, you would say you were happy with sort of how it all kind of came together, both the play and the movie.
I mean, based on what I've seen, because I only know the play version of that I've watched, and so this I felt like was a faithful adaptation of what that was, and so that's like kind of like I can't draw from the books and say what's there or not there, but I can say that from the story that I know and have seen, like I think that it captured that faithfully. So
Okay, but okay, my question though is, were you okay with the source being the play Wicked, right? Like, do you like the way it all wraps up? I guess.
I think emotionally, yes. I think where we end up with these two characters, I think there's some poignancy to the ending that we'll talk about later. But so I left this moved. Yes, I was moved by it. While also acknowledging that I do think that there's a clunkiness to some of the direction here that I thought was a little bit more um, refined in the first half, which is interesting because these were shot
Back to
consecutive,
back.
like back to back. But there is some degree of that, and maybe just because they shot it all of it together, then in the editing process of that, some of the things just didn't weren't as smooth as they could have been. Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
generally speaking, yes, yes.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No. Totally. I just trying to nail it down because I know, like, I obviously have it out for both the movie, but it's not just the movie; it's the musical that it's based on. I haven't read the novel, Wicked, but so I can't speak to that. But I ultimately just found like the conclusion to be pretty unsatisfying. There is emotionality that's the thing the movie delivers. It's really good at making you feel a certain thing in moments. But for me, the second you think about that at all, you're like, oh wait, it feels hollow for me. Um, that said, we have a lot more to talk about in spoilers. I mean, what letter grade would you give Wicked for good?
I'm oscillating. Like if I'd rather give this like a percentage. I would say that I would give this an 85%. So not a B plus, and not a little higher than a B, but somewhere in between there. Yeah. So, but I mean, but just for the sake of the purposes of a letter, I'll just say a B. For Wicked for good.
Yeah, positive B, positive,
A
not quite B
positive
plus,
B.
upper B.
Upper B. Yeah.
There we go. I'm gonna go with a D, so 67.
Okay.
uh,
All right.
I think no, I really think the musical numbers there aren't. I know there aren't as many like showstoppers as there are in the first half, like in terms of like all timers. But I really thought Cynthia Erivo has a musical number. I think it's roughly around the beginning of the third act, and there's also she's got
No
two
good
music.
deed. No
There's
good
a yeah,
deed.
yeah, No Good Deed was yeah, exactly. No Good Deed was phenomenal. And there's another one, I don't want to spoil it, but there's another one that she sings with someone else that I also thought was the way they shot it and executed it, I thought was really well done. And a movie emotionally as well. So I really like again the musical removing all my feedback about and the critique about the script. I actually think the musical sequences themselves are overwhelmingly extremely well done. And there are when those moments come along, you're like, wow, that is something that man, they really nailed it. And then I shift back into something I don't like very much. So yeah, I would give it a D. So I want to give it credit. I'm not saying it's a big fat F and I hate it and want it to die in a fire, but I do think that I don't know, I wish they would have stuck more with the convictions that I saw they were sort of hinting at more in the first half, or maybe I just missed the point, which is very possible. All right. Well, Laron, what other recommendations, movies, television, novels, video games, music, what else would you recommend to people who, are interested in Wicked for Good?
I think if they haven't already, they should probably. I mean, I haven't myself done this, but I think they should probably read the books. You know what I mean? Because I think like you're gonna draw much more from that four. I think it's a 4-part series. of
By the way, these
of
are not. By the way, just to be very clear. There's these are Wicked, which is not. It's a separate series than the original L. Frank Baum series, which is like 20
yes,
something
not
stories.
The Wizard of Oz, but Wicked. There's like a 4-part series that's going to lift a lot of the source material from what you're seeing for this musical. Yes,
Hmm.
so I think that's probably the best thing. Obviously, Into the Woods is something that comes to mind because it's kind of in that same universe. It's a musical. It's dealing with fantasy and witches and things like that. But yeah, that would be, I think, the best thing with this particular thing is to definitely go to the source with that. But
Yeah. I'm going to throw out, I can't remember what I recommended last year, so hopefully I'm not repeating too much. But I would throw out, this, I think a big part of the idea that we're seeing throughout both films is the point of view of the storyteller is very important. And the point of view of the storyteller is they get to tell the story how they want to tell it. And that is why I'm going to say, if you want to go to a different musical that also sort of postures this idea of like, what if history isn't what we remember? Just go watch Hamilton the musical. I mean, I think that's got an incredible, for me, I feel a lot differently about the end of that one, where I feel like it's the who lives, who dies, who tells your story. That's really important. And I think it gets to the truth of those ideas for me a lot more astutely and cohesively than Wicked does. So Hamilton the musical, not currently a big picture adaptation of that one yet. I kind of don't know if I want there to be. I do like on Disney Plus, you can watch a recorded version of it that's pretty good. I'd also say, on the same note of visual spectacles that are dealing with the power of stories and how they can shape or reshape the way we look at the world, The Life of Pi, really exceptional movie from Ang Lee that not a lot of people saw back in 2012. Gosh, can't believe it's that old already. But phenomenal movie. Again, stories about storytelling and narrators and who is the storyteller. How does how they tell the stories shape the world view that I choose to follow and believe in? So that's another one. And then I'm pretty sure I said this last year, but just go watch Smallville. I mean, Superman, Lex Luthor, good and evil, dealing with a lot of the same themes, honestly, in a very different way for a very different demographic. And I think it's at least they also deal with the idea of like destiny and fate and like there has to be good and evil in a way that I find that's a little more, at least the show questions it a little more. So Smallville, even if, you know, 70% of that show is also not very good. Yeah.
I mean, that's fair. It's still enjoyable. There's still a soft spot for Smallville,
I do.
in my heart. I have not watched it in years, but I remember it meaning a lot to me when I was younger. Yeah.
I love it. It's very CW, and it was back when there was everything had to be 20 episode seasons, so it's like you get a lot of CW crazy network TV shenanigans. But man, when you get those really good episodes, they really hit. All right, listeners. Well, if you do not want to be spoiled on Wicked for Good, go ahead and tune out now. All right, Laron. So I want to start with what I'm calling cameos, tie-ins, and rewritten canon. Oh my! So Wicked for Good leads directly into the story of L. Frank Baum's The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, or leads directly into, like you were saying earlier. It's more like it's leads into a story that is happening concurrently with that story. Is maybe a better way to put it. And as is the case with the musical and the novel it's based on, the story is a major deviation from Baum's own canon instead of creates its own. Now, here's the thing. I'm not going to be one of those Baum truthers out there who's like, oh, this is not how he wrote it. This is all dumb. And listen, this is how many times have remakes rewritten the rules from different authors? Not playing that game. What I do want to ask you, though, because one of my main points of criticism was, I think the Tin Man is probably the strongest example, but you take this character from the musical Bach, and I didn't know he was going to become the Tin Man. So it's like, oh gosh, he's the Tin Man, and Elphaba's sister, or I guess Elphaba accidentally takes out his heart and makes him the Tin Man. And then you have the Tin Man who's like freaking evil Tin Man. He's like, I'm glad I don't have a heart. I want to kill her. Just the way that sequence was shot was pretty hilarious, actually. I mean, like, not hilarious, but it was crazy how dark it went so fast. But like, there's no payoff for that character in the rest of the movie. So it was like, oh, the Tin Man, who was a supporting character in Wicked, now Tin Man in the movie Wicked Part 2 and The Wizard of Oz, and he's out for vengeance, and then we don't ever hear about him again, really. So I guess for me, my perspective with that example, at least, is felt like a massive waste of time. Like, why do that? So for me, I saw that as like a poor sort of like a failure to successfully weave the story of Wicked into the story that we know. I want to get your take though, Laron. I mean, like, how effectively, from your perspective, do you think Wicked for Good sort of integrates itself into that world and story that we know?
I mean, the question is how effectively it does it. I think yes and no is how I would answer that, because I do think, like, again, that is a great example where one character where I think is used kind of more so as a plot device here, obviously, to talk about just how radicalized the messaging around the evil of the Wicked Witch, of course, we know is unfounded, but is how much.
Partially unfounded, because she does turn him into a Tin Man. I
This is
mean,
fair, but I do think. But was that with Mal?
no, not with Malice. That's the whole thing. Like, it's not
Yeah,
the
it's the misinterpretation, maybe, is a better word, of how people perceive her. Like,
right,
most of what she's done that people think are bad were accidents, that,
right.
things she was kind of led to do, and then not realizing the large, like when she made the monkeys, like, turn with all this was like, yes, I did do that, but also I was I was forced into doing that, and then found out later what I was doing, and now I'm to blame for it. But I do think, like, in general, because, again, when I first saw the play adaptation, it's like, oh, okay, so the Wizard of Oz aspect of this is very tongue in cheek. They really don't. It's not like, it's definitely like they make little snide comments about Dorothy. It's kind of a like, oh God, this girl, get her out of here. Like, so it's kind of this idea that's never the story they're trying to tell. This is truly a story about Glinda and Elphaba alone. And then I guess what I'm saying is, I don't care as much about how it ties into the original thing, because the story that they're telling in front of me is more fixated on this idea of these two opposing friends that are at odds because of the kinds of status and different positions they have in life. And I found that aspect of the story far more interesting. But to answer your question, yeah, I mean, I think if that is something you care about, that the other characters in that story that you're aware of from the original story, not being given their full, their full arc or their full whatever, then yes, then I don't think it effectively does that.
I guess my thing is, like, I don't know. It's not about it's not about holding the Wizard of Oz as some like sacred thing. It's from a storytelling perspective. It feels like Bach had no emotion. Like, had no arc. Like, he had an arc. They were working. They were setting up in part one, and they don't pay it off in part two. Other than that, he just got screwed. Like,
Yeah.
frankly, him and his girlfriend, the other Elphaba's sister, totally got screwed. And
Yeah.
but they don't really deal with that at all. So I'm like, well, then why add that to this story? Because
And there was an opportunity, I will admit, to doing that. Specifically with Nessa Rose, what you're talking about, the
Mhm.
wicked, the other Wicked Witch. Um,
East.
I feel like there was an emotional beat missing there for me, just from Cynthia Erivo's character, and I think it's just because of how it was directed and maybe how out of sequence it was. When she finally comes to see that her sister is deceased, I felt like that was so rushed, to the point where, like, we don't even get a moment where she gets to grieve her sister in that regard, no matter how bad or whatever she had become. Or I did miss that in that moment. I felt like there was an opportunity there for her to actually sit with that for a moment before we got into the kind of more comedic hijinks that she gets into with Glinda very immediately after that, at that little reunion or altercation that they have where they're fighting with each other's, the broom and that sort of thing. I thought
Mhm.
there were some missed opportunities, I think, with the parts of the story that were always in the peripheries and never really, like, elaborated very deeply on. That's something I think that the film adaptation probably could have done, to deviate from
Well,
from
especially all
what
the
we,
extra runtime. You know what I mean?
because
Like, because
it's
these movies
there.
are longer. Yeah.
It's there. But then I also hear that criticism from people who are very pure to the way that it was originally told. It was like, I'm glad they didn't go into it, because I didn't want to hear that part of the story.
Yeah. I'm
So
not.
there's
My
two different.
criticism. Yeah, I want to be very clear. My problem is not it's not following the original beats. it's like it's a weird like world building. It's like, why did you bring that up if you didn't do anything with it? In this case, for me, it feels like a slightly larger offense because it's two characters who are set up in part one
Sure.
who basically get like dropped. Like they have bad things happen, and then the story drops, and it's and their characters that are important happen to be important to the story of the Wizard of Oz. So you're like, it gives it this sense of importance that it would not have if they were just like two other small side characters. If that makes sense, I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense, and it doesn't like ruin the movie. I was like, well, what was the point of all that?
Yeah.
I guess I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely think the the parts of the story that probably don't work as strongly are definitely the aspects of it that stitch it together to that other story. Because it's not focused on that, but also it's not that it couldn't be.
Yeah.
That there wasn't an opportunity to try and do that. Even just a scene or two here. Um, and I think he was so fixated on being so faithful to the original text. Like, if I give Dorothy 2 lines, then all of the wicked people are going to come after me. That
Yeah.
I wasn't pure to the original. You know what I mean? Like, so I feel
Which
like
is funny given how much stuff he added. I mean, I haven't watched the musical, but this is like the runtime of the two movies is considerably longer than that of the musical. So, I mean,
yeah, because I think the play is 3 hours total.
Yeah.
Like, so they're pretty evenly hour and a half a piece, give or take, with the intermission between them. So I really do think that personally I would have enjoyed these movies more as one piece. I enjoy the first one, like so much of the first one, or the first half of this story, just how much world building they were able to establish in that space. The character, I felt like they between the two of them, like all the different people were set up really nicely. And I think here with this one again, and I felt this when I saw the play too. It's like it does kind of like it's more streamlined. It gets right to like kind of concluding everything very fast without really giving it a chance to breathe as much. And I hoped that they were going to fix that with this. And I felt like I had the same critiques of this, but there's still so many like indelible moments in both sides of the story that resonate with me personally. And I think it's just that central story of friendship, between the two of them that I do think is very powerful, especially this
Yes.
idea of ostracization, and the ways in which, like how, people who do feel othered or outside of that kind of space find they embrace these two characters, and also seeing someone like, as you mentioned, a very, what could otherwise just be a very vapid character. I think Ariana has to really navigate a lot of different emotions at once here.
Mhm.
That the opening number of the first one, which is also kind of, the tail end of this one, the No One Mourns the Wicked, has such a different, it hits a lot differently now because we have so much more context for what she said. Because at first you think she's avoiding telling all these people about Elphaba because she's embarrassed maybe to say she was friends with someone like her, but it's really she's actually staying loyal to what she promised her about not clearing her name so that she can continue on living her life elsewhere, and that Glinda can uphold her position, there in Oz as the good witch, so that everyone, doesn't basically drag her into the mud like they did her. And I found that's the part for me that's honestly the poignant aspect of this, is that her friend is gone, but she has to uphold this lie essentially, so that she
Yeah.
can.
That's what falls apart for me because I'm like, well, I don't like the choice that they make is that Elphaba must embrace being the evil wicked witch so that Glinda can maintain her position to run Oz. I don't get it because
Yep.
it does not make sense to me why they need, like, there has to be, in order for Glinda to be the good witch running things, why there has to be a boogeyman. I mean, because and again, this is, again, you said PG. I don't, I think even the novel, which I understand is way more geared towards adults, probably is not as nuanced about this, but I don't, like, that's just a bit I don't buy. I'm like, okay, so, like, and she also by the way, Glinda also believes Elphaba is dead, actually, which is another thing. I'm like, well, that's why I get into the cake it. You have your cake and eat it too. Like you want us to have the emotional devastation of Glinda has chosen to lie about who her friend was so that she can keep being who she is. And she believes she's actually dead, which is, despite my criticism about that plan, I'm like, well, that's still deeply tragic and heartbreaking that you have to have that existence. But the reality is, Alphabet is still alive, and this other land with the Scarecrow Fiero, that's another thing I don't really like.
They're going to be in Dune Messiah. I told you this in my
Yeah,
review. That's
they
what
do Messiah.
they're setting that up.
Yeah. They're on their way to meet up with Anya Taylor-Joy.
Yeah,
In the
yeah.
desert. Yeah. I can't wait. That's the real push. I'm glad that worked for you.
It works for me in the sense that, not that I think the messaging of that is like is that like what are we teaching somebody by saying that? I don't think it's encouraging that. I think it's more so like, this is the bleak state of the world, is what we're saying is like, this is how people work. And I think that's the part of it at least that's how I interpret it.
That makes the movie even more depressing.
It is depressing. I do think it's depressing. I think it's more depressing than people realize, is like this idea that like, we can't change these people. People basically like,
Yeah,
like,
I don't buy. I'm not on that ship. I'm not on that ship.
okay.
I mean, I'm not saying, I'm not here to say you're wrong, but
Yeah.
Caleb, that's where I'm like, it's a whole like, if that's the truth you're trying to reveal, I don't agree with that as a philosophy on how to effectively implement change, is to con people differently than they've been conned. Like that. So again, we're probably thinking about this way more than the person who wrote the book did. I mean, at least that's how it felt. I was like, because I started thinking about it, and I'm like, wait, I don't think I understand that that's what they're running with. But in order for there to be a good guy, there has to be a bad guy, and that's very oversimplified. That implies there's just a lot of things about the world's not that way. There's a lot. Everything. The world's more gray. It's more neutral. And I guess to your point, you're saying, well, that's whether or not we like it. This is generally the world we live in, and I also don't agree with that. I don't think we're not in George Orwell's "We've always been at war with Eurasia" sort of thing. We haven't gotten there yet, hopefully.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know. That's just. Maybe that's a me thing. Maybe I'm too much of an optimist, Laron. Maybe that's what
that's what it sounds like, and that's okay. That's actually a better place to be in than me. I'm very much at the point where I don't know. Like I'm not saying
You're
people
like,
are.
I want a good con man driving the ship, not a bad one.
I'm not saying I think that people are impossible. It's just, I do think that if enough of this has been pumped out, if everything is so confusing now, we don't know what's true anymore. We don't know what's real anymore. I don't trust most of the things that are fed to me at this point. You know what I mean? Like, there's a kind of, I have a certain degree of like, I can discern for myself if I give enough time, but I don't trust that everyone's going to put that much effort into it. And so we're stuck with this kind of like, like at some, how are we going to change? How are we going to move mountains in that regard?
And your solution is we just give people, I mean, not your solution.
Solution.
Not your solution. The solution that the movie / musical puts forth is just give people a lie that's not as bad as the other one. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's great.
Yeah, that's fair. It's an observation more than I think that it is like a message than anything else.
Yeah, I don't know. And I think maybe that's, if I were going to boil this down after I've gone on all these soapbox rants about this, I think it oftentimes feels preachy without having a clear thing to say. Does that make sense? Because it's lamenting a lot of things, but I'm not sure what I'm supposed to take away from it, really. And then you get the other part of it, which is Elphaba's actually alive. She's escaped the Fiero, who is also, by the way, the Scarecrow, which also, that's where I'm like, I feel like Laron, and this is going to sound so mean, I'm like, this is where we've crossed into teen girl fan fiction. Oh, the Scarecrow is actually the secret lover of the Wicked Witch, who was put on this post and twisted around, and then they actually run away together after all the conflict happens. I'm just like, I don't know. I struggle. I'm struggling with that whole, because I actually thought Fiero was pretty interesting, one of the more interesting probably the third most interesting character in the play, in the movie, and what they did with him was not. I love to see him. He actually had an arc at least that I think was notable and memorable. It just the way they integrated it into the Oz stuff. I was like, what are we doing here? I don't know. I don't
So
know.
you almost wish they just stripped it of all of the Oz things and had it just been a story. Yeah, I can
Yeah,
understand that.
if you're going to okay, my thing is if you're going to include those things, like it just it was weird because I thought his arc was pretty good. I mean, his arc was again like the third most interesting one in the movie, and I thought Glenda and Elphaba are both pretty. That's the highlight for me, like the way those at a high level, the way those characters are written. And anyway,
Yeah.
well, we've talked about the current day implications a little bit. Last year, when we did part one, we asked the question, "Is Oz a fascist?" And I think our discussion was around how Oz in that film used animals as a scapegoat to sort of power his political agenda. And this is sort of a commentary or allegory for the way fascism can take hold, and how misinformation can take hold and sort of poison an entire culture of well-meaning citizens. So, if we are on the same page that Oz is in fact a fascist, Laron, what is this film saying about fascism? And you've sort of talked about it a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like it shows just kind of like one, like how easy it is to manufacture this, like how it really at this point takes one charismatic figure who can exploit and leverage the kind of fears and prejudices of other people to wield power, and how it becomes almost near impossible at that point to discern the truth at that point, and how easy it is to just to fall into that trap of manipulation because you're appealing to people's things that people hold very dear. Prejudice is unfortunately it's something that is super like it's not that it can't be changed, but it's definitely something that people have like a visceral reaction to, and we see that because whatever it is that these people fear, whatever it is that they're afraid of, like if you impress that upon something, like like here in this case, we're using Elphaba as this figure of like they already fear her because she looks different, she sounds different, her skin color is different, all these different things. Um, if we just you turn that into the bad thing, then it's very easy. It's very easy to get all these people on board with that. So I think it's actually kind of a cautionary tale about how malleable that could be for some certain people, and how we shouldn't be so quick. You know what I mean? To fall trap to that, and I think that we often in society and history have historically done. So that's kind of like the overarching thing that I could draw from what this film is saying about fascism, because at the end of the day, he could do the right thing, and
Yeah.
she gives him the opportunity to do that, but he doesn't believe that he can convince these people at this point. Now that so much has been built around this facade and this artifice.
I feel like that's his excuse though, because he doesn't even try. You know what I mean?
No.
Like I feel it's not necessarily a criticism. As much as the way they write Oz in both films, this film in particular was really interesting. I think because he's a charming. I mean, just like in even the original novels, he's like a charming like carny, right? And they even have a
Yeah.
whole song about it that I thought was pretty. I like that song. And he's like seems well meaning. I don't actually understand why he insists on creating a fascist state. We don't ever really get to the heart of that. And, maybe that's not the point. Maybe that's outside the scope of what Wicked and Wicked for Good are really trying to capture. Because even him, at the end of the day, we see that there is some humanity within that character. The way
Yeah.
he sort of describes it as, "Oh, this is I told these people think I'm great. It's this lie I told them, and now it's a getaway car. I can't bring it back in." And maybe there's some truth. There's probably some truth to that, but he also doesn't really try at all. And we don't understand why he doesn't like animals. And also, there's the big twist at the end, which is that he's Elphaba's dad, which was another thing I was like, why bring that up? Because I think I guess that's what's supposed to like motivate him to realize he's messed up. But anyway, I said I don't feel like the movie really gets into, and I don't think it necessarily needs to get into the why fascism is the way it is. But I think you're right. It does an excellent job demonstrating the mechanics of it.
The mechanics of it.
How
Yeah.
yeah, how
Yeah.
an individual, good, bad, the intentions aside, how an individual can come in, take over a system, exploit the system, and if you have a clear enough
Create a
goal,
narrative,
create a
like
narrative.
perpetuate the narrative, build a case around the narrative, and
Right. To people
market
who don't know
everything
any better. You know what
to
I
people
mean?
who don't know any better. People who impress they that take what you say for. And I think it is like it's basically like how much should we actually trust all of our leaders? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
I mean, yeah, for
because
sure.
we take it for granted. We just believe what they say. He's the president. He's the governor. He's the whatever it is. Whoever it is for you, whoever it is you idolize. At that point, like there's danger in doing that. I think is kind of what it's saying. It's like in that maybe we should be a little bit more critical. We should look at things a little bit deeper. But you know,
And
um,
also, I think what's crazy, a takeaway I have about this is fascism is textbook. It's been implemented in various ways throughout human history. But the playbook is very similar. It's similar enough that we can boil it down and incorporate it into a Wizard of Oz story,
yeah.
and we should be very
Patterns are
weary.
are pretty
Yes.
well established. Like we've
Mhm.
seen it, and it's not changed very much over the years. Which is so crazy is that we can know that we can see the patterns and see, doesn't this seem a lot like Nazi Germany? Doesn't this seem a lot like this? And doesn't it? You can present that to them, but in real time, it's like people don't recognize it until the damage is already done, and then we retroactively look back at like, oh yeah, it was all like he did this, he did that. It was like I don't know what that it says about our culture, about our society, that we are not able to, like, we can all say to you, look at people in the face, everyday people, and ask them, like, what Hitler did bad? And they'll say, absolutely. They wouldn't even question it. Most people. I mean, there are a couple of wackos out there, but I'm saying, like,
In general, yeah.
generally speaking, people are going to denounce that, like, just unequivocally, like, that's terrible. But if you sit here and point out a similarity that's happening in real time, it's almost like they don't recognize it for what it is. And I don't know what that is. It's like certain people do because we're like screaming from the rooftops, like, hey, this is fascism. This is not
Mhm.
good. And, but there are people who either turn about and they have their own reasons. I think there's something about our,
Well, because it conflicts with the stories they're telling themselves about what's happening.
exactly. They want to
Or they
believe that
don't or they
they
don't wanna be
want
bothered by it, like
exactly.
the
They don't want it's inconvenient to them in that regard, and it disrupts everything that they've already built so much in their mind, the narrative that they've been fed. And I think that that's what I mean by with the story is like it's saying the same thing about these people is like they could change. We could tell them the truth. We could present this to them and like but I'm not saying like it's saying this, it's encouraging us to do that. It's just saying that this is what people do. And this is an example of how that has happened, in this fictional world, but also we could apply it to our
Right.
real world too.
But I also think my one caveat would be if you're going for the metaphor within the movie, Oz does not try to, like doesn't at any point try to tell the truth. So,
Yeah,
like, not that he should I mean, not that you'd expect him to, but it's one of those things like, he's like, "Well, they won't believe me if I tell them anyway." And we never really see that tested within the context of fiction because I don't necessarily buy that. If he came out and said something, actually, like, Elphaba's my daughter, I wrote all this stuff, made it all up, would people still like him? Yeah, some people would still like him, but I mean, I don't know that it would be everyone would just fall in line either, if that makes
sure.
sense. But I don't know. Again, this is to your point. I want to bring this all back to this is a PG story. It is a novelization that is inspired by the works of The Wizard of Oz, that is adapted into a musical, that has been adapted into a film. And Jon M is bringing in some ideas that are contemporary and applying it to the story in a way that feels timely. Even if it's not saying anything particularly profound, in my opinion, it is sort of like capturing the zeitgeist and things that are important and pressing in this time and putting that into the fiction. And I think that's noteworthy, at the end of the day. But, well, Laron, anything else you want to say about Wicked for Good before we wrap up?
Um, you too, sir, have changed me for good.
Oh, me too. Changed me for good. Oh, I take it back, guys. That right there. This was an A plus. Oh, well, I too can say you've changed me for the good, for the better. And I
Yeah,
hope I'm not you don't have to be a bad guy in order for me to be the good guy, or vice versa. I just want you to know we can both be good
we could
guys.
both be good guys.
Yeah.
Complicated good guys.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey guys, this has been so much fun. Laron, thanks for sitting through my intense I don't really thrash movies very hard. I try to always be positive, and I want everyone to understand. I respect if you really like and love this movie and it moves you. This is again not my shiz.
Yes.
It was my takeaway, but I appreciate you having the discussion with me. Listeners, thank you for tuning in to hearing Laron Chapman and I discuss the film. Whether or not I'm right or wrong doesn't matter. This movie is making a ton of money, so something tells me that you guys are pretty happy and can't wait for the sing-along version. Nothing wrong with that. World's crazy. Enjoy it. Laron Chapman, where can people follow you and your work online until our next episode?
They can follow me here on the cinematropolis.com. They can follow me on Letterbox at Black. Oh gosh, I've already forgotten my own handle. Black Movie Magic OKC.
Excellent. Listeners, of course, you can find me also at the Cinematropolis. All the social medias at C Masters Talk. But honestly, if you want to keep up, subscribe to the Cinematropolis on YouTube. I've been pretty quiet there, largely posting a few things here and there. All of our audio episodes do get sent to YouTube, but we're going to start experimenting more there. So if you want to follow along with the experiments, follow us there. Otherwise, follow us on all of our social media channels at the Cinematrop. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. Again, we've actually got an exciting lineup of films in the pipeline here between now and the end of the year. And I'm extra thrilled that our next review is going to be the third entry of the Knives Out trilogy, Wake Up Dead Man, from writer-director Rian Johnson. This is one I'm really looking forward to. And we'll catch you again next time.